I've learned a lot through a couple years of living. The up and downs and the choices that we given.
Hi, Rock.
And the decisions that we make as
My name is Kevin Hines, and this is my $7 moment. In the year 2000, under the pressure of a severe brain disease, bipolar disorder, and battling that from 17 to 19 years of age, I was 19 in the year 2000, I found myself at the Golden Gate Bridge, ready to die by these hands. I was hearing voices telling me I had to die. If you can imagine a voice in your head that you don't recognize as anyone you've ever known, telling you what you have to do. And I went to that bridge believing that I was absolutely worthless. And I really thought that my family and all of my friends thought I was their greatest burden. And in a terrifying moment where the voice told me what I had to do, I went over that rail. Over 2,000 people have died at the Golden Gate Bridge. I would become one of the 36 in 80 years to survive. I would fight my way to the surface from 70 feet beneath the water. Things came into play that day, moments in time that had they not occurred, I would not be here. A woman saw me go over who was driving by, and she called her best friend. That's important because her best friend happened to be a United States Coast Guard officer manning the waters of that bridge. The reason they got to my position in the water before I would set in hypothermia and drown is because of that wonderful woman who made that phone call. In the water, as I flailed to stay afloat, wading in the water, trying to stay up, my legs useless. I had shattered my T12, L1, and L2 lower vertebrae into shards like glass, and they had splintered throughout my insides. I was in the most physical pain I've ever experienced in my life. I got to the surface. I bobbed up and down in the water, and I just prayed, God, please save me. I don't want to die. I made a mistake. Over and over again. And something began circling beneath me. I remember thinking, you've got to be kidding me. I didn't die off the Golden Gate Bridge, and now a shark is going to eat me. Perfect. But it never bit me. It just circled faster and faster. And no longer was I wading in the water to stay afloat. I was lying on my back, being made buoyant by this thing, thinking this is a very nice shark. It turned out, after I was on a television show promoting a suicide prevention campaign sometime later, people had written into the show from all over the world. One guy wrote into the show and said, hey Kevin, why don't you tie an anvil to your legs and do it right this time? Because there are people like that in this world. And that hurt. But another man wrote in that changed my life forever. A man wrote in and he said, Kevin, I'm so very glad you're alive. As I was standing less than 2 feet from you when you jumped. He said, no one would tell me whether you lived or died that day. And I didn't find out whether you lived until right now watching this show. He said, Kevin, there was no shark like you mentioned you thought there was on the show. But there was a sea lion. And the people looking down believed it to be keeping you afloat until the Coast Guard boat arrived behind you. And in these pictures he sent me, you can clearly see this creature circling beneath me and my body lying atop the water being kept afloat. The Coast Guard arrived. They fished me out of the water. They asked me a bunch of questions. They got me to the ambulance. They saved my life. In the ambulance, I got to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, a doctor was leaving. He was not supposed to be there that day, but he stayed to do my back surgery, to replace my shattered back with metal, and to give me the ability to walk and run. To keep that ability was because of that man and his team. They say the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. It was a few months after my attempt, still wearing a back brace and walking with a cane, I found myself at my old grade school, speaking to the then 7th and 8th graders, 120 kids in their Catholic uniforms, sitting cross-legged on the floor, ready to hear my words about recovery. I'd written a speech about resilience and hope. It was 17 pages long. It took me 45 minutes to read aloud, and I stood there holding onto my cane with one hand and reading this story, my story, to these kids. And all the while thinking, who is this helping? Why am I doing this? What am I doing here? And when I dropped that 17th page to the floor, thinking about how pathetic I was to have done what I did, and feeling so ashamed for hurting all the people I did, all these hands start going up in the audience. These 120 kids asking these amazing, intelligent, intriguing questions. Questions that clearly showed how much they cared about their fellow human being. And I went home with my father fulfilled in a way I had never experienced. I'd made an impact. Rather, my story had made an impact. 2 weeks later, the priest called me back to the rectory at the school, and he handed me a manila envelope filled with 120 letters from 120 kids. Because they wrote those letters, and because they were minors under the age of 18, those letters were screened by the teachers. And the several kids who were actively suicidal, we found them through their letters. And the school got them recognition and help to them and their families. And I know those kids are alive today. And that moment right there, that moment I knew I have to do this however, wherever, and whenever possible. That's my $7 moment. I lived, and I can't just sit at home playing Metal Gear Solid on the computer, eating potato chips. I have got to stand up and fight for my brain and my health, and fight for the well-being of every person that I come into contact with. I've got to try to help as many people as humanly possible. That is my purpose. I found it. Took me a while. Took a lot of denial and pain, but I found it. And my $7 moment is finding that gratitude within every moment I get to share with Mother Earth. And I want to say thank you, Rock, for opening up your channel to this kind of message, because it's amazing. And on a side note, Rock, my father gave me a signed copy of your book, The Rock Says, which to my recollection is the first place you expressed living with depression. And that book has on many occasions helped keep me here. And I'm grateful.
Check it out. Yeah, so the people know the truth of all the shit that I've been through. Diamond in the rough, it's time to convince you I'm out to change the world. That's all that I'm into. Even though a couple true friends is essential. Before you think big, boy, you gotta think simple. Build your foundation and focus your mental.